Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Let me just try and get the stuff a little bit sorted out. I can't see you guys yet. Okay, no worries. Just to start off, I really hope that every one of y'all use that chat so that I can understand if you have a question as I'm presenting, and also to get to know you guys a little bit better. So if you can tell me, introduce yourself, where you're from, and then what sort of sports you are coaching, and the sort of age group and the sort of context that your athletes are from. That would be great. So do type away so that I can see and everyone will get to know you. Just introduce yourself as I'm presenting. Okay, as what Chon Leong has just said, this series of workshop is based on what Wade Gilbert has done and his book on coaching better every season. And he has done a whole lot of information within that book to try and guide coaches so that they know during different phases, coaching phases, that there are certain information and skill sets that you will need to guide you. And for today's session, we are looking at the pre-season. So we are looking at that part of the season where you are envisioning what you'll be doing with your athletes or your team moving into your coaching season. So the other three will be the in-season, and then at the end of the competition is the end season, and then off season. So going through that, I'm sure a lot of you all will probably lament that in the sort of coaching role that you have, you don't have the luxury of a long pre-season with your athletes. You are engaged maybe in the in-season. So you will probably have to adapt to what the sort of coaching context that you have, and hopefully you will learn from today's session on how you can do effective setting. Okay. Long time ago, I did this same goal setting for coaches in the NCAP days, and there was this video, and I thought it was good. It features a young Michael Jordan in this movie back in the 90s, late 90s, Space Jam. And while this is not really young Michael Jordan, but it's talking about young Michael Jordan, and he's talking about his aspiration or ambition to be a pro NBA player. And just listen through the sort of conversation that he has with his father.
I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. I think about it every night and day. Spread my wings and fly away. I believe I can soar. I see me running through that open door. I believe
Michael? What are you doing out here, son? It's after midnight.
Couldn't sleep, Pops.
Well, neither can we with all that noise you're making. Come on, let's go inside.
Just one more shot?
All right. Just one.
Yeah.
That's good. Shoot it again. Getting pretty good, son. Go ahead, shoot till you miss.
You think if I get good enough, I can go to college?
Hey. You get good enough, you can do anything you want to, Michael.
I want to play at North Carolina.
Now, that's a real fine school. Real fine school. You can get a first-class education there.
I want to play on a championship team. Then I want to play in the NBA.
All right, slow down, son. You think you ought to get a little sleep first?
And once I've done all that,
Uh-huh.
I want to play baseball, just like you, Dad.
Baseball. Yeah, now that's a sport. And when you're finished with that, I suppose you're gonna fly, huh?
Come on and slam, and welcome to the jam. Come on and slam, if you wanna jam. Hey, yo, what you gonna do? 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 People in the house, let's go. It's your boy JC. So, pass that thing and watch me flex. Behind my back, you know what's next. Get jam, all in your face. What's up? Just feel the bass, dropping, knocking down the room. Shaking, quaking, space kaboom. Just work that body, make sure you don't hurt nobody. Keep wild and lose your mind. Think this thing in the overtime. Hey DJ, turn it up. The QCD gon' burn it up. Come on, y'all, get on the floor. So hey, let's go. Come on, it's time to get hype. Say who? Come on, all the fellas say who? Come on, one time for the ladies say who? Now, all the fellas say who? Right.
Everybody get up, it's time to slam now. We got a real jam going down.
So you got the idea about Michael Jordan. For those who really don't know who Michael Jordan is, at least you have a glimpse of what he can do. And what I like about the video is he touched on all the different sort of goals as a young boy. He was talking about it. Now he was featured in that movie, so obviously he knows the sort of content that comes out from how he's depicted when he was young. And that conversation at the back with his father is a true reflection of what he has in his mind. You know, when as a young child, he wants to go to that North Carolina collegiate team. He say he wants to be in the championship team. That means be in the finals there and representing North Carolina. And then later on, he talks about wanting to be a professional basketball player. And wow, it looks like for a young child, it's like far off. It's too ambitious. But he has done his goal setting in his mind. He has that kind of aspiration. And then later on, whether it's a bit romanticized and so on, he talks about him wanting to be a professional baseball player, which is supported by his father because his father was a professional baseball player, in which he did. He achieved all that, exactly what was being said. And of course, when he says about him wanting to fly, and then he, they looked at that ring there, he was known to be literally, you know, slam dunking and flying in the air, you know, Air Jordan and so on. So for those who are in that era, who understand and appreciate that, that's the sort of man you're talking about, and fantastic example of goal setting. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to touch on what this culture of excellence is all about. And a lot of time we talk about it, but it is to do with trying to get your athletes to appreciate there is certain behaviors and practices that you will need in order to achieve the goals that you are setting. So there's no point in setting goal and all that, but if you do not have that set behaviors and practices that collectively you come and agree, you will not be able to create this culture of excellence. And that's what this series of workshop is trying to touch on. So you goal set, you have to keep that in mind. So we're going to start off with this gentleman. And I noticed there are quite a number of swimming coaches who are around. So you would probably recognize this person, James Doug Councilman. He is the famous collegiate coach who pretty much innovate in the way coaching is done back then. And he's back in the 70s and so on. Back then, they were all not as familiar with sports science as what we know today. So he was the innovator of looking at the swimming technique underwater and coming up with, why do you do this? How do you do the catch? What's that feel? What's the most efficient technique and so on? And so he invented the idea of taking less of a breath in swimming and so on. So he talks about a good coach setting goals with his athlete, but realize that they aren't grounded in stone. You have to be flexible and realistic and avoid setting goals that are incompatible with your athlete's abilities. So that's a hint as well, that when you goal set, you don't do it in the absence of your athletes. So there would be some of this terminology that I want you to be comfortable with. So there are three of them here we're talking about. The first one being the vision. So what is this vision? Vision is what you have prior to setting a goal. Important that you get your athlete to see this as a compelling vision for what you are about to set in terms of goal, and they are going to be pursuing it, both as an individual and as a team. They need to see that that's something that they want. If it is not something that they want, then you are highly unlikely to achieve that target. So you must provide that vision. And sometimes, like Michael Jordan, you know, after a while, when he achieved all that, he was in the championship team, he was in that winning team, and he was NBA MVP many times over. He wore that ring, and it's hard to motivate such a player of that caliber. So if you watch this, The Last Dance in Netflix, you will notice that a lot of times he starts a different sort of individual goal setting himself. He drives himself by making kind of a scenario that, a sort of vision that he wants to outbeat a particular player, a particular team who has beaten Chicago Bulls. And he wants to set the record straight that Chicago Bulls can do much better. And so that becomes his compelling vision. So if you watch that docu-series on Michael Jordan, The Last Dance, it's still available on Netflix. It is worth watching because almost every series you will hear that little idea of providing himself that vision that would drive him, because he has been there, done that. He needs something else. If somebody happened to trash talk him and cause him to be really angry about certain situations, he will use that situation to motivate him for the next season, outdo that athlete or that team. So it's very interesting. So that's the vision. So what's the next one? You have target outcomes. So when target outcomes, we are talking about the goals. We are talking about something that's synonymous with setting a target or setting a goal for your athletes and team. So that is important because you are constantly setting that goals throughout that season. It might not be set in stone, just like what Councilman was talking about earlier, right? Because things change. So we're going to touch some of these things later on. And the last one is target conditions. So these are the third things that I want you to try and remember. So differentiate the three of them. Target condition basically means, as a coach, you know what is currently the standard of your athletes, what's the current state of your athletes or the team, but you are trying to know what is possible ahead in order for them to achieve that vision, in order for them to achieve that goal that you set, right? So you need to get your athletes focused on the process and knowing what's the next best step in order to try and achieve that. So that's the target condition, closing that gap in order to achieve that outcomes. Okay, I hope you're following that so far. So pretty much you have a typical situation where you identify what target outcomes you and your athletes want to achieve, and then you move on to make sure that they have a clear vision. If they were to be in that situation, they know they have achieved that target, right? Whether it is a short-term, mid-term, or the end of the season target that you're talking about. And then you're constantly setting that next step goals for them and monitoring whether they achieve it. Do you have to tweak the goal set? Is it too high a standard for them? And then back on again, you have to identify that target outcomes because of these changes and do that tweak. So even through that season, it's not cast in stone because you have done it at the pre-season and that's the end of it. As a coach, you are constantly having to make changes to the target outcomes that you want and the process in which you are going to reach this next step. And I will touch why this is so. Okay, so just bear with me for that. What are the sort of 3 questions that you will ask your team or your athletes? So one of which will be, what could be achieved? We really put our hearts and mind to it. So that's a typical question you ask your athletes. So because your perception and their perception is totally different. So it is important for them to look at it in their perspective, and you try and facilitate that sort of a thinking, because some of them may be too up, too high, unachievable. How do you bring them back down to where it is possible based on their current standard? Some of them may be really lacking that confidence and they don't see themselves as stretching themselves in terms of the sort of target outcomes that you hope they would be able to see. So you need to ask them, if you really put all that effort and all your mind into it, what do you think can achieve? So that's a typical question you ask. Then how far could we go if everything comes together by the end of the season? Everything that you have planned, everything that you have done to preempt the sort of things, close that gap, how far do you think you can go? So again, that would give them an idea of how much they want to push it. And for swimming, it might be really how far do you see your PB? What kind of PB are you going to set for yourself? You know, especially when you're dealing with youth, they will hit their PB, but how far a PB is reasonable, right? In football, a particular skill they have not mastered, you want to look at that. In a football team, you want to look at how, as a team, collectively, they get their skills right, that they are able to increase the number of scores or goals that they are going to achieve for that season. Yep. And how many passes, successful passes that they probably can do much better than the previous season. The sort of stats that you as a football coach covering, right? Then what kind of season would you like to have so that we look back with fondness and feel that it was worth the time and energy we put into it? So it is important at the end of it, they ought to know that they achieve it and they feel so much joy, a collective joy, because it is set right. It is not too far off, and it's not like, well, it's a given, you know, so there's nothing that is too hard for them to achieve. So if they see that it is something that it is difficult, is stretched, but yet they manage to achieve it, then you know you would have done a really good goal setting exercise with your athletes. Another good example, if you are trying to develop yourself, create those kind of effective goal setting exercise with your team, is again look at the another series involving coaching in Netflix that I think you will like. It's called the Coach's Playbook. And it features a lot of successful high-performance coaches, from Jose Mourinho and coaches that managed the Boston Celtics, the national women's US soccer team, and so on. And they talk about how they create that sort of culture, that sort of behaviors and actions that we talk about in terms of what we perceive, you know, as getting that team goal set and to achieve what we want to achieve. So they've got ample examples, and each series talk about different coaches, their challenges as they look at it. So it's again something that is really worth for you to look at. So that series actually talk about pillars of success. So pillars of success is, what do you need to have that every member of your team knows that they have to behave that way. The way they move, the way they train, the way they act, the decisions that they make is based on this pillar of success. Again, use a bit of your time to just run through that series, and you will understand as we go along what this pillar of success is all about. So typical examples. So we have some examples in Rick Gilbert's book of successful team. For swimming and diving, it could be really establishing that these are the sort of values, whether it's performance values, social values, or moral values. It is critical that this swimming team have it. So you talk about fun, they're training day in, day out in that chlorinated water there, but that element of fun, created by not only the coaches, but the athletes, keeps them going, keeps driving them. And the others are like dedication, respect, confidence. So that's typical of the pillars of success that is needed in order to achieve that. For basketball, it could be accepting the different roles that they have, whether I'm the center, whether I'm the guard, and the forwards, and so on. There needs to be communication between players and honest communication, and also communication with the coaches, and not because they are terrified to communicate anything that they are having issues with. So a lot of them have got these pillars of success in which there are conditions in which are necessary for them to achieve that. So part of that goal setting is creating that. So another example that was given in that book was this under 18 rugby team having that contract between the coach and the team. And at the end of it, they will come up with a document like this, talking about the sort of goals that they are going to have and the sort of pillars of success. In other words, they need to behave in this certain way. Unique to this team, unique to the sport. So you will have to be creative in terms of what are the things that will be an important ingredients of a successful team, for whether it's swimming, basketball, or whatever the sports that you are handling. And if you see in this document, the coach on the left there signs it off, and the team captain represents the individual athletes there will sign off as well, that it is agreed on that day that these will be the pillar of success that this team will abide with. So every time when they train, they need to know there's the right place and the right time for doing certain things. So they have got to be serious when they are training. They need to do their own individual job in the team, and so on. So they will use that as a reference point. So that's an important part of that goal setting exercise that you have with your athletes. Another example is the New Zealand All Blacks, or the rugby team. They are an awesome world-class team. And this person, James Kerr, did a book entitled Legacy. I'm sure quite a number of coaches would have read that book. So he collated some of the principles that the All Black holds true. So they have 15 of these principles, and they're fantastic. They are something that probably you can adapt or adopt as well for your sport. So just giving you some of the examples of what covered. Sweep the sweats. Sweep the sheds. In other words, they're professional players, but yet you will see them that when they come in, nobody has to be telling them that they've got to keep that place clean. They will return back at the end of a match, however tired. They will all, even as professional, clean up the entire restroom there and leave that place exactly how they came to that place with. So that's uniquely the All Blacks. They are known to be true to that principle. That would prevent any of them thinking that, no, I am a professional player. I don't do this kind of mundane work. I will send somebody else to do it. It's part of the culture of the All Blacks. And to this day, to be an All Black, they believe that this is one of the important principles that will make the players more grounded. And there are many other principles. So there are 15 principles. Another one is that go for the gap. There's constantly learning and wanting to learn. So I won't touch on all of them, but they're fantastic principles that you can use for your purposes as well. Just like number 6, no dickheads. In other words, no prima donnas, right? It is so apt for any sort of team sport that you don't want prima donnas. Okay, so that's important. So I won't touch too much on that, but it's great resource. Just Google that under Legacy, James Kerr. Look at the title at the top, or you just Google 15 All Blacks principles, and you have that in the internet that you can use, and that will guide you in terms of what are possible pillars of successes that you want to inculcate in your team. But before we get too carried away about it's all about athletes and all that, I think this quote is useful. This was Tiger Woods' earlier coach, and he gave this quote: "I'm not coaching golfers. I'm coaching human beings who deal with love, hate, and fear, and all those different aspects in the emotional area. If you look at them as just golfer, you're missing out." So that's a reminder for us coaches that don't just look at them as an athlete there. When you go set with them individually, think about the sort of issues that each of your individual athletes have. At the end of it, you are actually growing that individual. When they know that you care about them, as a person, and you let them develop as a person, they will ultimately build that trust that you are goal setting with them and trying to make them better, and they will have that shared sort of belief that you will have in the goals that you are trying to develop with them. Okay. The other thing that Rick Gilbert put in the book was the idea of this golden circle. I'm not too sure whether you have heard of Simon Sinek, who has been involved with organizational excellence, more for corporate, and is being used even in schools and so on to understand how do you try and move the organization to excellence. So you can, and what Wade Gilbert has done is he adapted this into coaching. So what it means is it's important for you to go into the center of this golden circle, this 3 concentric circles there, and then ask yourself, why? Why do you do what you do as coaches, right? And then think of once you know, if you are a youth coach, what drives you? What do you see as a success? What is the sort of belief that you have? Your coaching philosophy. When you are very clear on that, then you will be able to know how you can move and help your athletes to achieve what you would feel as a success. And then you can address the outer circle, which is what then needs to be done. Okay, so he adapted this. So this is what he would see as a coaching circle. Coming straight from the one in the center, which is a red circle, you talk about why. So it could be for you a calling to teach sport, life skills, like the idea of being committed, being working as a team, having that courage, having that discipline. That's what coaching is all about, not simply talking about the technical aspects of it. So that is central to what drives you. What do you see as a success? Because not everyone's going to get the championship title, but at the end of it, when individually and collectively, when you see that each of your athletes is a person in which you say that, yep, there is a clear development, and the athletes know it themselves, that they have grown into something that you have goal set with them, something that they feel good and confident about themselves. And if you remember some of the things that we talk about in terms of the outcomes that we want of our athletes, the 4 C's, not only are we looking at developing their competence, we're looking at making them confident athletes. You are looking at making them athletes of character, and then you are also teaching them how to connect with their fellow athletes and the team and the coach and the teachers and so on, right? And at the end of it, think about the how. How do you help this athlete achieve that? What sort of pillars of success, what sort of practices or action or team ritual that you want in order to help that? And most of you all would have come up with what you perceive as an important ritual that you feel is slowly developing them, is slowly getting the athletes to get the outcome that you want. And at the end of it, what do you get? So are you looking at better athletes, better people who can compete to win in sports and life? What do you see at the end of it? So that's what effectively is the golden circle that helps us to understand better as you are doing your goal setting, and it is clearer as you go along. So let's come into setting effective goals. So how do you set effective goals? Okay, so this one is humorous, so please don't remember this. You talk about SMART goals, right? So SMART goals is it about being specific? Start with a specific goal that you want, and then M is for more about the measurement. In other words, how do you measure this? And then A is for ask if it is finally over. And the R is realize I ought never to start because it's a lousy goal that you set. And then the last T is maybe you should think about a new goal. So you always hear about SMART goals. There are some variations, so please don't remember this one. It's just a joke. Huh? So the true one is this. So remember this one. So S is about being specific about what you want as a goal for your individual athletes or your team. So best if you get that written, like the example that I shown earlier about the rugby team. It's written, it's signed as almost like a contractual thing that's the sort of pillar of success. That's the goal that you set for that season there. And collectively, if you're dealing with a team, that will be signed off by your team captain. If you're dealing with individual athletes like the swimmers, you ought to have an individual sort of a contract that you are specific in the sort of goals that you hope for them to achieve for that year. M is for measurable. In other words, they need to know what can be observed, what can be tracked. They know when they achieve that. So it should be something that is measurable. So we're going to touch a little bit about that. A is for attainable. So again, there will be variations of this acronym. So don't fuss about it. This is in Gilbert's book where A is attainable. So you need to know that you have the resources, you have the sort of support that will ensure that as long as the athlete have that same desire as you to try and achieve that goal, you have that support system, you have that resources to help them to, on top of the sort of coaching skills that you have in order to bring them to achieve that. R is realistic. A lot of times we set too high goals that really is out of reach for your athletes and they become disappointed, disillusioned, they might drop out of your sport or have little faith about what you can achieve for them. So it is important that you set a more realistic goal. Yeah. And the last one for T is time bound. You should have it such that the athletes know when is the time in which I should be achieving that. And barring any sort of a setback, you ought to be achieving it. If not, you got to tweak that again, because sometimes there will be barriers to that, and we will touch a little bit more on that. So these are some of the examples that I want you to see. Now, I want you to try and look at this example. And again, on your chat group, I want you to distinguish. There are some of those that talk about it in terms of process related goals. All right. And some of them are more outcome goals. In other words, that's the end goal that you want. That's the outcome goal that you want. Okay. So to run a 1,500-meter race on Saturday in 3 minutes 57, right? So that's a very specific outcome goal, right? You want that. How are you going to train for that? How are you going to build that ability to be able to do that is more of the process, right? But here you're talking about an outcome goal that they know after all that training that you do with them, to bring them to that process of developing it, that is an outcome goal that you want them to achieve. That's an outcome goal. Okay, so I'm going to give you a next one, and I want you to put in the chat here, what do you think this one is? So I'm going to watch as you type that in. Is it a process goal or is it a performance goal? So to keep the player I'm guarding from having more than 3 open shots in the next game. Is it a performance goal or is that an outcome goal?
All right, coaches, please take maybe 15 or maybe 30 seconds, think through it, and then just type your answer in the chat box. Thank you.
Awesome. Performance goal, outcome goal, Esther and Harry, outcome goal. Excellent. Yeah, so he's talking about really guarding to make sure that they have more than 3 open shots in the next game. Sorry, your attacker will have no more than 3 open shots in the next game, right? So it's really an outcome goal. Excellent. Yeah, Roger, well done. Yeah, next one. To make solid contact with the ball, 80% of the time in batting practices. Make solid contact with the ball 80% of the time in batting practice this week. Performance goal as well. Performance. I see a lot of performance. Yeah, Eugene, Clarence, performance. Excellent, coaches. So again, you did not talk about how are you going to make that solid contact as a softballer or as a baseball player. How do you make that solid contact? If you are describing exactly how they do it, maybe 80% of the time there, that helps. That's a bit of the process. But here, when you say solid contact, 80% of the time, that means I can see that, I can observe it, but it is a performance goal. It is an outcome goal. So you can have your teammates looking, okay, I missed that, so that's not a solid contact. So next swing I made, I hit, I have a good clear hit on that on the ball, and you know you can count that as a performance goal or outcome goal. Excellent. One more. To block the correct person every time in today's scrimmage. So in this is more like American football. So there is a scrimmage, almost like a scrum in rugby, and then target the right person for you to try and block. Yeah, yeah. Again, so we are still talking about performance goals. You are not, obviously, you're not easily fooled by that. I'm sure you are waiting. Hey, is it that it's a process goal? Okay, next one, to score a 72 in golf championship on Tuesday. I believe you guys know, right? Let's have one more. Yep, excellent. Yep, great. Well done, Bernard. Yep, okay, cool. Now here we go. To extend my concentration at practice today from 5 to 6 minutes. What is this one? To extend my concentration at practice today from 5 to 6 minutes. Team performance. Okay, very interesting. I thought this last one could be either way for sure. It can be used as, yeah, this is more extending it to 5 to 6. But don't forget, I can't have an athlete looking at me and say, yeah, you concentrate for 6 minutes today. They don't know what's going through my mind. So it is a process in which I have to now inculcate in myself to try and stay focused. Really stay focused and make sure I'm giving my 100% there. All right, from 5 minutes, there's my usual, to now all the way to 6 minutes. No, I'm not distracted. I'm not having small talks with my teammates and so on. So I will see it as process. So I see Rashid there, only one, putting that as process. Well done. Yeah, because it is something that will help me improve. Because if I can be more focused, longer, that will help me. So that's really touching a little bit more on process, right? If I can get somebody to measure that as well, then possibly. And I can still say that if I'm measuring it myself, yeah, maybe that can be also constituted as a performance goal. But I think you got the idea of that, all right? What typically would be a good SMART goal that you can use. So there are enough examples for you guys to understand. So we're going to touch on what were the key findings that we talked about, and most successful goal setting would have this. One, they're ambitious but realistic. And most of them, they are effective, will end up like this. In other words, the athletes know that's going to stretch me. It's not something, I'm bound to achieve that. It is not too ambitious as well that they don't think they will not be able to achieve it. These are the ones that the athletes will see as something worth pushing, and they will push at it, and usually they will end up that is most effective. These are the when the goals help to increase the sort of commitment that you get in training. You know you would have set the right goals for them. You know, and I as coaches, I'm sure you are really good at making them tick. In fact, the most effective coaches I know tend to be the one that really know how to make the athletes come into the session day in, day out, really raring to go at it. So something that you have done, you know, motivate them. And with that in mind, a lot of time we forget that, oh, this is an exercise done in the preseason, and we forget that every session that you do requires the coach to remind them of that session's goal. In other words, today's goal will be for you to try and achieve this skill. And some of the examples that we talked about in the examples that I shared with you all, and we were talking about performance or process, those are the one in that session. Today, I want you to make no more than 3 blocks that, no more than 3 passes that your opposing team can make because you have blocked that. As a defender, that's what I want you to do. So that's typical of what perhaps in a training session for a football coach they will be doing. And that motivates the defender to really work at it. So when it's game time, they have a goal that is reset for that session, and it builds up from there. So that's important for coaches to try and do. Don't forget that goal setting is not only for the entire team, but it should be each individual athletes as well. So a lot of times we tend to forget, you know, especially if you are a football coach, you tend to do it as a whole, but you forget that each individual athletes are different. So you need to know them very closely. Okay, so here is where when you do a goal setting, it's important that you put it in writing, or else you will find that you won't be able to achieve that. Okay, I give you this example, and the next video will be a good one. This person is an inspirational or motivational speaker. He was a former monk. I don't know whether you know this person called Jay Shetty. So he has a very interesting video, and he talks about it as more of a life skill. And a lot of coaches know whatever you teach there, whether on the course, on the field, on the pole, you are actually teaching and building that individual, and that can translate into life skill. I think a lot of coaches will know that. So this next video is interesting. So pay close attention to the sort of 3 questions that you ask, and try and relate that to sport.
Hi everyone, my name is Jay. Welcome to Invisible World. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. All the messages, all the comments, and all the love. I genuinely appreciate all your interaction. And today I'm going to be sharing with you a how-to video. These videos are practical tips that will help you apply the themes and the topics that I talk about in all of my videos. The first video that I made was called 3 Motivational Messages That Will Transform Your 2016. I wanted to share with you a video on how to set effective goals that you will surely accomplish. In 1979, interviewers asked the Harvard MBA program how many of them set goals. They found that 84% of the program set no goals at all, 13% of them set goals but they weren't committed on paper, and only 3% actually set goals that were committed on paper and had plans to accomplish them. 10 years on in 1989, they interviewed the same individuals again. The results were absolutely staggering. They found that those 13% who set some goals but hadn't had them down on paper were making twice as much as the 84% who had never set a goal. And even more staggering was the fact that the 3% who had committed goals written on paper had actually been making more money than the 97% put together. Today's session is all about how you can make those goals. I'm going to share with you 3 questions that will help you reflect on the goals that maybe you've already set for the new year, or maybe goals that you're about to set. The first question you need to ask yourself is, are your goals too vague and are they not specific enough? The reason why I ask this is because maybe one of your goals is to get fit. Now, when you say that, do you mean as fit as a model? Do you mean as fit as Cristiano Ronaldo? Do you mean as fit as an athlete? How do you define fit? Or is it just fit enough to walk up your stairs without feeling tired? Becoming more specific about the goals you want to achieve means that you're more likely to understand how much planning is involved in terms of time and resources and how you're going to make it fit into your incredibly busy week. Try to make your goals as specific as possible. The second question you need to ask yourself is, are your goals too grand to be achievable? Now, I'm a big believer in defining your destiny and reaching and accomplishing your goals, but Bill Gates said a fantastic piece of wisdom that I want to share with you. He said that actually people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. We always feel that we can make a bigger change quickly by impulsively acting rather than building blocks that will actually be great foundations for future success. What you need to do this year is actually try and find digestible blocks of work, little pieces of action that will help you effectively bring about change in small areas of your life. When these add up and build together, you'll gain momentum, and that will affect things in the future for you as well. The third question you need to ask yourself is, are you surrounded by the right people and are you influenced by the right people? If, for example, your goal is to give up chocolate, it won't help if you work at a chocolate factory, you live next to a chocolate manufacturer, your best friend loves chocolate, and you're making chocolate cake on the weekends. It's just not going to be possible. You need to be spending time with people who have the same goal, but also people who've achieved that goal and made it into a habit. Are you aware of the little milestones that you need to reach to incentivize you daily? We need to feel inspired by our goals every day, and if you're feeling that your goal is too far away or a tangible outcome is in too far a distance, you need to make it closer. You need to be noticing and observing the small things, the small changes that you can be grateful for that you see every single day or every single week. Make sure you know your milestones, otherwise you're going to get lost. A goal without a plan is just a wish, and Tony Robbins said that setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible, and therefore you really need to write your goals down. Writing your goals down makes them a focus point. It makes sure that everything you're doing in life becomes aligned with those areas. We have to make sure that what you want and what you're thinking about, what you say and what you do are in line. That's how we create harmony in our lives. I really hope this has been relevant for your goal setting. I really look forward to seeing your goals and seeing you achieve them this year. I really want you to get involved in this conversation and this dialogue as we think out loud together. Hi everyone, my name is Jay.
So you can see that there are a couple of things that Jay Shetty was talking about. Like, one is the most successful one, the one who would achieve that, even though there's a small percentage of them who actually wrote down that goals that they want to set, they are the ones who are more likely than not achieving it. Now, that's the same with whether it's organization. That's why they come up with strategic planning and goal setting exercises there. The same with coaches. They need to try and get that into the habit of doing that. I know a lot of you all would have probably do a lot of goal setting with your individual athletes and teams, but do you get that down into writing? Read that. You can get your captains or your athletes to write that down. And I'll give you an example, a typical form that you can try and use. So keep that in mind, yeah, as we go along. So what are key findings that we know that helps in terms of getting more effective goal setting? So we need to write it down such that it's more in a positive term. Rather, same thing like when you're giving feedback. Don't talk about what you don't want them to do. talk about what you want them to do. And it should be more in a positive sort of a statement. So keep that in mind rather than, I don't want you all to be miscommunicating with each other or setting rumors and things like that. Talk about how they should be behaving. I want you to be more responsible in the way you speak. I want you to show good sportsmanship and so on. So just keep that in mind. Yeah. We talk about short and long-term goals. So don't just put them with a high and longer distance long-term goal. They need to know what are the mid-term goals that would scaffold them into that long-term goals, similar to what I started off with that video, try and get you all to think about. And the other thing is stating what are the outcomes and the goals you should set and how you're going to achieve it, and differentiating the two. And obviously, you guys know how to differentiate that. And the clear meaning is process goals. Don't forget, it describes how these skills should be performed. Okay, for example, you want to improve in terms of how you follow through on a particular shot. A performance goal will be really like what you have highlighted, and most of the examples there describe how well a skill should be performed, right? So 75% of a free throw in basketball is observable and something that you can see. And then you got to regularly monitor and evaluate that. So we're going to touch a little bit on that because things change. And here we are talking about sometimes your athlete, your star players might be injured, and that changes everything. You got to get somebody from your bench, to now perform there in that critical part of that season and so on. That's typically what you have to deal with. Or your swimmer may be injured and you can't, now you got to retrace back again in terms of the goal initially set. You got to readjust that. So what are the possible barriers that when you are trying to get your athletes to achieve it, but they can't? One is the lack of time. Not only like what I said, for coaches, you are engaged only during the main part of the season. You don't have too much or long pre-season, so you don't have the luxury of doing this exercise. So you've got to be creative. If you are engaged straight on in the competition season, how do you create that goal setting exercise as they are going through your training in the early part of that season? Too many goals. If you set too many goals, then the focus will be wrong. Your goals are too vague because, like what Jay Shetty was mentioning, you've got to be really clear, very specific on what you are saying. So using that SMART goal will help guide the way you should phrase out your goals for your athletes. Your athletes, in terms of the mental capacity, they lack confidence. They don't have that effort, or they don't show that motivation. Something you need to address. So obviously, the goals that you set needs to have this in mind, or you have to consider this in order to be realistic in how you try and set that goals, because they're just not ready. And the other one we touch about is physical. As they are going through your training, inevitably, they may get injured, they may fall ill. Like the COVID situation is something that you would probably not anticipate, and it throws everything off. If you're preparing for next season, which is likely to start, you are having to deal with this. All your targets set will have to change, right? Especially for the team as well. You do not know where their starting point is, right? And of course, different athletes will have different abilities. So your new cohort will have a different set of abilities. You cannot have a similar sort of goals that you constantly set for them. Some of the things in your goal setting exercise will bear in mind that on the left, you have your players, they have their goals and so on. They have their emotion, they have their perceived competence. And on the right, you as coaches, you have your goals. You too have your sort of philosophy and beliefs and emotion that will guide you in terms of having that conversation there with them. And you have your perceived and possibly the truer or the more realistic perceived competence of your athlete, your individual athlete. You know where they can bring themselves to. It's a matter of you going to that central position with that questioning and listening and observing your athletes, and over time, making them have that trust that this collective goal is achievable. It is something that you are constantly having yourself in that central circle there, in that interaction, trying to ensure that they are believing in themselves, that that is a goal that they progressively can achieve, and they are plodding along and able to achieve that. So you have to have that constant conversation throughout that season with your athletes. It's not, again, like I said, it is not something of an exercise that you do in the pre-season and that's the end of it. The last bit I want to talk about is in terms of the season is not about just the sports goal itself. A lot of coaches will know that when you're dealing in whether it's a school or club setting, you will have to deal with it in terms of your program. In other words, you are there for a CCA program that you are likely to be the coach in the next season and the next season and so on. That's true for a club. That's true for a national age group. That's definitely true for a national coach, that you are constantly having to look, what's my year plan, what is my 4 years plan, and what's my probably 8 years plan moving forward and as you go along. So you have an entire program that you have to deal with. So setting program goals is important. So what do you look out for? So that is a sort of legacy that you will leave behind for your program, right? So keep that in mind. So what are the typical sort of examples there? So you will possibly have a session that you deal with perhaps a CCA teacher. Perhaps it is your high performance director that is talking to you about, yep, what is the sort of expectation that I want of a team? Maybe it is out of your reach, you know, and you already have that conversation that you will try and bring that understanding that I know the background of my team. This is a more realistic sort of goal. So you will have your initial conversation with somebody, like before you even start off with your athletes. And then typically you may be talking about not just your individual athletes, but as a whole in terms of participation. In other words, how many people are actually getting into your football program, your swimming program, your chokeball program, and so on. And they will talk about retention in terms of how many in the next year would come in and sign up for your program. If you have done a fantastic job with your program, you will see that they will be interested. They will be by word of mouth. People will want to come in. So part of your role as a coach as well is to have that retention. That may be part of your goal setting as a program. Engagement. How true are the athletes believing that, yeah, you have a fantastic program, a successful program, that I want to be part of that? You do a questionnaire. Do they feel and report that, yep, I'm happy that I'm in your program, and so on? And then the other thing is the competitiveness. In other words, develop athletes and teams who are consistently having that ability to show high level of performance, so that your director or whoever that is assessing you will feel that, yep, you're running a fantastic program. I'm confident with that. So this is typical of a collegiate sort of a program where they look at it as a whole. They looked at it in terms of participation, retention, engagement that you have with your athletes and so on, and how good are they according to the sort of a standard that they will expect of that school, the club, the collegiate program, or your national age group program, and so on. So remember, I said I would show you an example. So this is one example that you can do with your athletes. Ask them about what are the sort of goals, and then you will have your feedback that's given. And next one will be, after that conversation, you will come to a common ground that, yep, this looks like a more possible sort of target that you should be setting for yourself, and so on, both a process and both performance. And then the athlete will sign off, you will sign off. You can keep that and file that and define it as you go along. So that's a typical example of that. And that's found in the Whitfield as well. So just closing. So best coaches will go great lengths. They will not only identify the gap of what is the current sort of a standard there and know what is possible, but they also talk about specific performance and process goal that needs to be attained in order to close that gap. Okay, so that is more important about effective goal setting. So finally, in order to know that you are achieving that, you must evaluate them. You must do a frequent check that your athletes can achieve it. And you've got to keep adjusting that to know that if they are falling behind, you've got to change that so that their incremental adjustment will keep them plodding along to achieve the targets that you set. So this is typically one of those, some of them call it spider web, some of them call it performance wheel, that you put in the sort of areas in which they got to work on. And these are the sort of goals that you have set out with them individually. And that rate marks, that rate bar inside will give them a visual illustration of where they are. So obviously their shot on goal is really good. So they got to work on having discipline regarding the penalties, things like that. And they have to work on winning face-off. Whenever they meet up with another person, they've got to be a little bit more sure of themselves and so on. This one is more on ice hockey, but you can always create your own. So that is a conversation point that you as a coach can have with your athletes. Yeah. With that, Chuan Leong, do I have a bit of time to show this video just to end off?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. This is one of the collegiate coach in US. He always talk about John Wooden. This is another person called Coach Mike Suveski. He's also known as Coach K. We have our famous Mr. K, Mr. Kunalan. So this is a person named Coach K, just as successful as John Wooden, perhaps not as successful, but he's the same coach that has brought the US basketball team 3 Olympic gold medals. So he's not only a successful collegiate basketball coach, he has brought this national team, the US national team, all the way to the last one was the Olympic team that went over and win the 2016 gold, if I'm right. Okay, so watch this video. He talks about how he goal set and what are the things that he would think is important from a perspective of a coach. So listen to.
The date was November 29th, 1980. The game was Duke versus Stetson. No one remembers it as one of the red-letter days in basketball history, but the Blue Devils' 67-49 victory that night was win number 1 at Duke and win number 74 in the career of 33-year-old Mike Krzyzewski, an early marker on a journey of epic proportions. 12 ACC regular season championships.
Duke wins the Atlantic Coast Conference Championship. The crowd is on the floor. This place is bedlam, folks.
13 conference tournament titles.
The Duke Blue Devils have won the Atlantic Coast Conference Tournament Championship, 79-53 over the North Carolina Tar Heels.
11 Final Four appearances.
Leitner catches, comes down, dribbles, shoots, scores!
4 national championships.
The Destiny Darlings have done it. The Duke Blue Devils have won their first ever national basketball championship.
A career headlined by numbers.
Mike Krzyzewski has won his 500th game. Mike Krzyzewski's 600th win. 700th victory. 903 is in the books. History is made.
Now, as a new milestone.
Mike Krzyzewski has accomplished something that no other NCAA Division I coach ever has. He just capped off the 1,000th victory in an already monumental coaching career.
Coach K's goal was never to become the winningest Division I coach of all time or to reach the 1,000 victory milestone, but goals have played an important role in his Hall of Fame career.
Well, I think goal setting is very important, and as far as achievement goes, individually and collectively. And I think you want high and realistic goals, and you want intermediate goals sometimes to go to a long-reaching goal. for me, all the goals that I try to have are within a season, because you're in the moment, you know. And so I've never looked like, well, I'd like to win X number of ACC championships. You don't do that. I mean, how could you even think that? Or NCAA championships? It's arrogant goal setting. You know, you should be humble and hungry and in the moment with the group that you have. And then I like having goals with that particular unit. Now, I know for my team this year, one of their goals was to win 1,000 games. To win that game. Well, I told them, I know that's a goal, but that would mean we have 17 wins. So that's an intermediate goal. You know, like, let's have bigger goals. And then you also set goals in how, for an individual kid on the team, like, I'd like to see this happen for him. And sometimes you sit down with that kid and talk to him about the goal, and sometimes you don't. You just, with the staff, like, let's try to get him to this spot in a couple weeks, things like that. But goal setting is huge, and I've done that my whole life.
I hope you enjoyed that particular video there, because it sums up really the sort of things that we learned today, and I hope you all managed to catch that. But I'm going to try and address one question is asked by Esther here. Who fills in the performance wheel? Coach or athlete, or they fill in the log? Most of the time, it will be the coach that will be creating this performance wheel there, and then filling as well that red block. And that must be something that even the players will know that, yep, that's true, that's about where I am, and so on, because you have some way to measure it. And those are the examples that we talked about earlier on, and we talk about performance goal and so on. But that's done by the coach. And so that becomes a conversation point. Yep, these are the areas in which you can improve on, and so on. I hope I answered that question, Esther. So with that, I'll pass the time to Chuan Leong. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks, coaches.